This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 10th of August 2020 and I am 2J.
And I am DM. Let's take a look at today's headlines. On the Daily Nation, State House tops talk on revenue. The Standard, Ruto fights to pay for Western land. And in the Star, a day with Sonko after UHURU city takeover.
Oh yes.
Shall we begin in State House?
Absolutely, but I don't know whether it was a call from State House. State House.
It's actually not proven, isn't it?
Yeah, nobody.
It just has a call from above.
Yes, State House stops talk on revenue, and this is with regard to now Senate Majority Leader Irun Kangata had called for a meeting of 40 senators to discuss tomorrow's issue at Senate with the CRA formula. Now, apparently, he gets a call from someone from State House and says, cancel the meeting. By this time, Kangata had organized lots of nyama choma and drinks for the 40 senators.
So he had to eat it alone.
So I think he had to give it to some hustlers who were chilling there and some of the drinks. But he should not have wasted that disaster. He should have
turned it into something else.
Yes, he should have taken advantage and said, this is nyama choma from Uhuru Kenyatta. Who wants nyama choma? You want nyama choma? You take nyama choma.
You get nyama choma. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this story about the revenue allocation to the counties has been going on for, is it a month now?
Yes.
And it's exhaustive, exhausting. It's very exhausting. But I want to say this. The Senate, our Senate, is both deceptive and incompetent. And they're deceptive for this reason. This debate about revenue allocation is not about Mwananchi. It's not about equitable sharing of funds. It is not. It's about political posturing. The Senate received the recommendations from the CRA back in April, at the beginning of April. This is 4 months ago. And if really, truly, there was issues there, then they would have articulated it to the public in an open way. But the reason why I'm also saying that they are incompetent is because they don't want to apply a framework. They're not. The Constitution is very clear in Article 203. About the criteria that should be used to distribute funds. And the CRA is called by the Constitution to make recommendations to the Senate. Now, the Finance and Budget Committee in the Senate did their homework. The CRA did its homework. They followed the Constitution to a T, and they made those recommendations to the Senate. So the Finance and Budget Committee then developed a report, and I think I said this last week as well. If you look at that report, the report from the Budget Committee, and you look at it against the CRA recommendations, you can see that this was a compromise document. You can see that counties like Mandera, which were going to lose 2 billion from what they had last year, are now losing 200 million. So they did a more palatable proposal. But the senators are still fighting on this. So is it really about equity or is it about political posturing? They are deceptive and they're incompetent.
I think it goes without saying that there is clearly somebody unnamed who is driving this car. And I think we've gotten to the point where they're just doing this for nuisance value, right? I think if people were to actually, Tuam, can you just hold your tongue a second?
Senators are political animals. They're wasting your time thinking that they should be telling us about equity. Of course they're going to posture. That is their job. They're political creatures. And let me tell you, the currency of politics
does it make it right?
Yes,
does it make it right?
Yes, it does.
Just because, why?
Yeah, it does.
Why? Please explain.
Because it's just the rational thing politicians do. If you actually expect if you actually expect politicians to behave like choir masters,
it's actually irrational. You know why, 2M? Because some of those politicians are digging their own graves. So it is not even politically expedient. There is no political expediency there. If you're a rational political animal, at least save yourself. At least do it for political survival.
They forget. You're not here to represent Mandera. You're here to represent Nairobi. And I think they should, operate accordingly.
They'll be replaced.
Shall we go to
the Standard?
Shall we go to Langata Road to Weston Hotel, where in the Star is the Standard is telling us about an ongoing case. Ruto fights to pay for Western land. Now, back when this case began, of course, we know that there was a case about the deputy president who owns Western Hotel being accused of grabbing the land from the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. And back at the beginning of this case, the National Land Commission had ruled that the deputy president or Western Hotel pays compensation to the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Now, fast forward, after multiple court appearance and multiple arguments by their lawyers, now a court has ruled that the deputy president should not compensate but should return the land. So this of course will spell more losses for the deputy president because he has made investment there. So now what he is saying, he has reneged and is offering to pay that compensation.
This story is so ridiculous, it's laughable.
I don't think he has a choice. I mean, he either saves himself.
I don't know if it will end well for him, because there may be a demolition down the road. Whichever way, there's going to be losses, because either it's a big compensation to be paid, or the hotel gets repossessed. And
I mean, the law tells us that if you do not enter with clean hands, right, it's going to find a way to catch you. So I think this story has proven to us that he did not enter with clean hands, and therefore I think he should return
by virtue of his reneging.
Yes.
Yeah. In the, what does the Star tell us today?
The Star tells us it's a day with Sonko after Uhuru City takeover. So this story is very confusing. The Star, I don't know what's happening. They've had a lot of sponsored headlines over the past couple of weeks. Maybe they're having some financial issues. Well, this story, they tell us that they had agreed to meet with Sonko a week prior, but he cancelled. And so then he says the next day that he's going to meet them. They meet at the Mbagathi hospital at 11, but they wait for him for 2 hours. At about 4:30, they're told to meet him at Garden Estate Primary School, where they meet for 10 minutes. They then step into his office, and for the 56 minutes that they were with Sonko, his phone rang 15 times, but he did not pick even once. Sonko says, "I'm still governor of Nairobi. All these functions that are transferred are still under me. That is why you saw me launching projects in Mbagathi, and now I am here." They then leave the office, and as they leave, they see plenty more people sitting to wait and meet with Sonko
for handouts.
I don't know, is this story trying to show how busy the person is?
What's happening with your guy?
Let me tell you, first thing I actually regret, I can't believe I voted for this guy, number one. Number two, I think he should just play his ceremonial role. Look, just today, the president, I think, commissioned about 24 hospitals that are going to be built in Nairobi. Three hospitals are level 3 hospitals that are going to be built. Now, the cost of building one hospital is about 70 million shillings. They used to tell us that the cost of building a level 4 hospital is about 800 million shillings. Now, that's just one grade down.
Yeah.
It tells you how much the military can be able to achieve in just a couple of days compared to a county government. If at all you could just get rid of these county systems and that's why I'm telling you.
What? Of devolution in total?
By the way, democracy and that devolution nonsense is overrated.
You're in quite a mood today, aren't you?
It is overrated. Let me tell you, if you're going to do things on results-based management, who would you rather choose? Show me a county that has done enough, as much as what NMS
Nakuru
has
is
done.
quite an impressive county.
Well,
I just think governors should be CEOs, really. That their CVs should match those of CEOs, because they're running a government and a corporation. And so far, the ones that we have had are not doing
I
well.
suggest we pick a winning headline. 2M's in a bit of a mood today. It might be that time of the month, so let's focus.
But we are glad you have found redemption and gotten saved and changed your ways and do not support Sonko anymore. So I don't think the Star gave us a good headline. Let me give you the criteria that we use to audit the headline. We ask, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy? I like the Standard.
Yes, with the Standard, I agree.
2M?
That's a good headline.
The Standard gives us our wedding headline. And onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. And just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze them for you. We ask, is the cartoon humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And finally, is it effective, or is the cartoon just plain lazy? In the Daily Nation, what have we got?
It's a drawing of a vulture, and the vulture has been labeled the COVID tenderpreneurs. And down there is an emaciated boy.
With a begging bowl, and a mask, and
now there's the
Kenya
city
shorts
of Nairobi. I think it's very pessimistic, man. I've had this feeling that people it's a stop in a teacup. I don't think these people calling COVID entrepreneurs did the wrong thing. They just took advantage of a crisis that's hit our nation, and they've made a little bit of money. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with it.
And this is the question. let me ask Kenyans this. Where would we be if we didn't have PPE, if we didn't have masks, if we had a deficit of all the things that are necessary for a country to survive and thrive in a moment of COVID? I think people would still be complaining either way. Why did you not give out tenders to more people? So I think...
Yeah, like we said last week, this is about an entrepreneurial spirit and people who were able to see the opportunity in a crisis. The thing that I don't agree with, though, is those that provided substandard material. I mean, this is health that we're talking about, not anything else. In the Standard, Gado has 3 pigs who are holding a press conference, and they're very well-dressed pigs, and they're saying, this is your formula for revenue allocation. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Of course, drawing from the family, from the George Orwell's Animal Farm. This, once again, I'll just go back to saying that the Senate is incompetent. If we're talking about equality or even equity, there's a fund. What's it called, 2M?
Equalization Fund?
Equalization Fund.
Yes.
The Equalization Fund has never been disbursed. And it has never been disbursed because of this kind of fighting since the constitution was put in place.
Its function is primarily to equalize
the marginalized areas, and the constitution is actually very specific on how they should be equalized. It's on things such as access to health, access to water, electricity, and those kind of things. So if we're really talking about equitable sharing, if we're really talking about equalization.
But DM, I feel like unfortunately with this CRA conversation, logic is not winning the day.
So you guys are spending too much energy talking about stuff that people care.
We care.
Well, yeah, we care. And
so,
I think
so we should talk about what we care
The people
about.
should equally care. Unfortunately, the logical argument is not working. And people are being played to their emotions.
It's precisely the point, TJ.
So we will drum it until the cows come home.
Yes.
We have the star. Where Raila is heavy laden. What's he carrying to him?
His BBI 2022 revenue allocation expectations. I actually think Baba is not in any crisis. And Prof says that when Baba is in a crisis, he's actually like a fish in water. Whoever is drawing him like he's suffering a lot or he has a big burden on his back.
He loves it.
Well, of course, this is off the...
He's a political porter.
This is off the interview that he did with NTV last night, I believe, where I think he was just forced into showing that he is in good health. And I think he has proven that he is. He's of sound mind. And he was saying things to the effect of, Uhuru has his mind in the right place. So everything seems to be good in handshake land.
So which cartoon was humorous, satirical, and effective?
None.
None. Absolutely none.
I like Gado.
Oh, I don't like Gados.
I want to propose a losing cartoon.
Gado gives us our losing cartoon. Fantastic. Before we get to our final thought, I'd like to remind our viewers to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what is our final thought?
And now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled An Essay on the Principle of Population. Why do you call it an essay and it's a book? Anyway, it is by Thomas Robert Malthus.
It's because it's a selection of essays. So this was actually written in 1798, so very, very old. And this week we will be looking at the global food crisis and some scandals that have operated around it. So I think if you were to ask somebody, can you picture 1 billion people? That's very difficult to do. And if you were to multiply that billion people by 7, we start, beginning to understand what the world's population looks like. But in 2012, when we exceeded 7 billion people, we were then later projected to reach 9.6 billion by 2050, which is in just 30 years. And all of those extra people are going to need food, they're going to need water, space, and energy to survive. And so this unprecedented growth has really put a strain on our environment, our economics, our government, our infrastructures, and our social institutions. And so while the growth of developed nations has really begun to stagnate, in places like Africa, we're seeing growth completely blow up. I think Nigeria is the maybe 5th most populous country in the world. And so we have overcrowding become this huge problem. And so one of the first people to publicly address the limits of the earth and the dangers of population growth was this man, Thomas Robert Malthus. And so he was known for his work on population growth. And he argued that if left unchecked, population will outgrow its resources and it will lead to a host of problems. And so he had this theory. He theorized that populations grow in geometric progression. And very simply, what that means is that when you have a sequence of numbers, each number is found by multiplying the previous one by a fixed number. So for example, if you have 2 10, 50, 250, 1,250, they're all multiplied by the same number, that is 5. 2 times 5 is 10, 10 times 5 is 50, and so on. But he said that food production increases in arithmetic progression. And that just means that the difference between numbers is consistent. So for example, you have 2, 5, 8, 11, the difference between all of those numbers is 3. And so very simply put, when you have those two competing growths together, we conclude that population will grow faster than the supply of food. So this exponential growth will obviously just lead to a shortage of food supply as opposed to the quick growth of people.
Can I give a very present example of exponential growth,
please,
that is related to population? So if a nuclear family has only 3 children, and each of their children only have 3 children, already those original 2 people who have 3 children have 12 descendants in one generation, because they have the 3 times 3 children 9 plus their 3 children 3. So multiply this by the whole population, then that's exponential.
Exactly, it just becomes crazy. And so he argued that because there will be a high population, the availability of food means that people will die. Just very blunt this man was. And so he theorized that there would be a correction that would take place. So he said it would take the form of natural corrections or preventative checks. And he said that these would lead to the Malthusian catastrophe, also known as the point of crisis, which should be shown to you on a graph on the screen. And this would bring the population back to a sustainable level. So for him, he said the natural checks would be the form of natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, viruses like COVID, or wars and famines. But he also suggested these preventative checks, which would be able to control the population. Things like family planning, late marriages, and celibacy. So what he ultimately did in this book is he raised the questions about how we should eat, but also how we should farm and cultivate our land, and how these choices affect our fellow humans. So he raised the question, does more food production lead to population growth, or is it the opposite way? Does more population lead us to create more efficient ways in the way in which we farm and cultivate? And I think I'll just end on this. Africa holds the key to feeding those 9 billion people that we may have on planet Earth by 2050. Because Africa sits on 65% of uncultivated arable land left on this planet. And so what we do with Africa is potentially going to save the rest of the Earth, even though we are also growing at a very exponential rate. This book was very interesting. After reading some of the sections, I thought, was he right? I know he wrote this essays in the late 18th century. 1798. But what was he right on his theory on carrying capacity, what J has just described? Of course, he was wrong. Let's just start with saying he was wrong. But he was right to some extent, because population growth has, of course, come with some consequences. We do have some deficits in the world. We have water scarcity. We have depletion of natural resources. But by and large, a lot of the premises that he made in the book have been proved wrong by time. For instance, he thought that the growth of the human population had peaked in his time, in the late 18th century. Of course, we know that that is not true, because the population has been growing at, like, I think 80 million people annually. So he also, Malthus, did not anticipate some human progress that would actually help keep the population growing, because he does have some very grim predictions, as Tuje has said, about famine taking people out, like naturally, war and other things that keep the population in check. But what he didn't anticipate is that there'd be advances, medical advances, such as the discovery of powerful vaccines that would end diseases like smallpox that were taking out whole populations in his time, and other health advances, like in public health, where there's sewerage systems and those other things that make people live a long and healthier life. He also just generally failed to anticipate human ingenuity, because you see, by looking at our exponential growth against the arithmetic growth of food production, he didn't think that human beings will be ingenious enough to actually create exponential growth when it comes to the production of food. There's been so many advances, of course, that give us high yield agriculture. Not all of them are good, but they exist, and they have led to the sustenance and the increase
of population.
Yeah.
So yeah, while he was not entirely wrong, of course, human resources are not finite, but he was also, I think, very off the mark in a lot of things.
Absolutely. This man, you can say, what they say, that he lived beyond, he could see the, no, this man will not see the future. And the reason I'm saying that is chapter 16, that's what I was focusing on. His thesis was that city living is unhealthy, and that a high quality of life in the city is unsustainable.
Yeah.
And to support his points, Malthus considers a problem with the definition of wealth as posed by Adam Smith. Now, Adam Smith says that wealth has little to do with the happiness and comfort of the lower orders of society. In other words, a country's wealth can increase or decrease without the poor being any better or worse off. And he disagrees with this. And he says, look, a city like Manchester had about 10,000 people in 1798. By the end of the century, it had about 80,000 people. Yes, a lot of people benefited from the Industrial Revolution. But then the city got clogged up, and the conditions of living were worse off. And people died because of those conditions, or getting worse off because of plagues and stuff like that. Says as England and other European countries to rely more on manufacturing and less on agriculture, food becomes scarcer and more expensive. Eventually, the rise in food prices will lead more people to invest in farming, and that's because the cost of food will continue to grow. And then he says it's also unsustainable because every acre devoted to fattening cattle, he observed, is an acre not devoted to raising grain for bread. Well, look, I kind of disagree, because if this guy lived to see Singapore today, and I want to build a picture of Singapore. Singapore is the 34th richest country in the world. GDP per capita, one person, $64,000 US. Yet only 113.9 hectares of land is allocated to vegetable farming. In fact, they only produce 22,458 tons of vegetables every year. And yet their population consumes over 500,000 tons of vegetables every year. Of course, they're not feeding themselves. And actually, agriculture only accounts for 0.5% of their GDP. That small country, with the wealth that country has, they don't have, someone else will feed them. But they don't have to, all of them, move to Yeshagi so that they can have a better quality of life. They all live in cities, and they are enjoying. And that's why they are rich.
They are enjoying a high quality of life.
Absolutely.
That's a brilliant comparison, Singapore. So from what we have read, Malthus and other historians were not necessarily right that it is human population or consumption that will bring misery and scarcity. It is perhaps things like wastage or not using alternative energy. So keep being creative and innovative to sustain future, even bigger populations. Thank you for joining us tonight. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on your TV screens on Palm, Free to Air, Star Times, and Go TV. Have a good night and see you tomorrow.